Welcome back, kiddos. Today we are going to end the Cold War. We're going to talk very briefly about modern American presidents, and then we'll have just one little baby set of notes left next, talking about modern American issues. So we're almost done with our entire semester. Oh my goodness! Let's dive right in and end this Cold War. So, the US and the Soviet Union, at this point where we are, they're not getting along. We still hate communism, and honestly, everything that's happened during the Cold War really does not help kind of assuage this fear. We are still terrified of communism, and everything that the Soviet Union has been doing during the Cold War has made us even more afraid of communism. So things are not going great. Somebody takes advantage of this fear. His name was Joseph McCarthy. He was a senator. He basically tells everybody that he has a list of confirmed communists, people who are like paid members of the Communist political party, and um, and that he is going to like take them out of positions of power, like if they work for the government or anything like that. And everybody is horrified. It's like, oh my gosh, there are people in the government that are communists. The communists are everywhere. The communists are coming to get us. The communist spies. They could be living next door to you. Everyone starts freaking out about all of this. He ends up accusing hundreds of people of being communists, from people who worked in the government to like celebrities, like people, directors, writers, actors and stuff. He accused all kinds of people of being communists, and they were forced to come in and be interrogated by a like like a congressional committee. Like congressmen would like sit there and interrogate them, like, are you communist? Do you hang out with communists? Who do you know that's communist? What do you think about that? And just ask them all the kinds of questions about their personal life and that kind of stuff, and make them defend themselves. Because if they were found to be communist, they would be like totally, they would, especially in the arts industries, they would be called what's blacklisted, meaning like everybody knows your name and you will never get a job there again because you're on this list of people like do not hire. And he would like ruin people's lives and stuff. If you guys know Lucille Ball from I Love Lucy, her husband was Cuban, and so he was accused of being communist since Cuba was communist, and she, by extension, also was like kind of accused, but she stood by him and everything was fine. She went on to have a pretty decent career, but still, it was crazy. He was just interrogating all kinds of people. He never, there he is. He never actually showed anybody like a literal written down list, so hindsight is 2020. We can probably look back and make a pretty decent, pretty well educated decision that he didn't actually have a list. But it doesn't matter. He is playing up on this really underlying fear that everyone has. And if you, by the way, if you accuse him of not actually having a list, then your name would probably end up on this mysterious list of communists. So everyone's just really, really scared, really, really horrified of communism in general, and then also the fact that there are communists, living here in the United States. And it was definitely crazy. He makes a critical mistake though. He starts accusing people, really high up people in the army. And a lot of people are like, dude, you don't go and almost die in World War II. Like, that's a terrible spy cover up, because like, what if you actually die at war? You know what I mean? Like, those people aren't undercover spies. Like, they've been serving, the United States and literally putting their life on the line. Like, they're not communists. And everyone was like, oh my God, I bet it's all fake. I bet all of it's fake. What? And he ends up getting kicked out of office. And it was like a whole big to do. And this is, well, let me not get there yet. This is what we call McCarthyism. That's why this title is this. It's kind of like sensationalism, somebody playing up on a fear that people have to get kind of notoriety or fame or anything like that. Some people use that term. We don't hear it too much anymore, but some people do use that term. So if you hear someone describing, oh, this is McCarthyism, that's what they're talking about. Okay, let's end this Cold War. So Russia starts to fall apart. The Soviet Union basically is running out of money, and they aren't, well, okay, let me, let's just say communism isn't working out the way they want it to. Technically, they didn't implement communism right. But the way that they had implemented it, it wasn't working. And they're running out of money, and the smaller countries in the Soviet Union are kind of falling apart, and it's just kind of chaos. We got to talk about some scandal, though. We got to get some scandal in here. If you have seen Forrest Gump, you know what I'm talking about. One of our presidents, Richard Nixon, creates a bit of a scandal. It's called the Watergate scandal. Now let me tell you a little bit background about Nixon. Nixon had been basically dying to be president. He ran a bunch of times, and he kept losing, and it was like his whole life's dream to be president. And like I said, he ran a bunch of times and was losing and losing and losing. And he just really desperately wanted to be president. He finally becomes president. And he has like an okay term. Re-election comes around, and he's really desperate to be re-elected. And he organizes a... What are you doing? Thank you. My goodness. He organizes a robbery of the Democratic Party headquarters of their national convention where they were picking their candidate. And they catch those people. They catch the people who were committing the robbery. And they all like had these weird creepy ties to, not creepy, but like very obvious ties to the presidency and the president's advisors and stuff. And then it kind of came out, well, maybe he knew about it. Like maybe he himself knew about it. And there's a whole big to-do. And they were going to impeach him. He was supposed to submit. So Nixon was like super paranoid about everything. And he recorded every conversation that he ever had in the White House, in his Oval Office. And so they ordered him to turn over the tapes where he was meeting with some of the people who were confirmed to have known about the Watergate robbery break-in, and he turns over the tapes, and there's like a minute and a half missing. Like they've just been deleted, they've been destroyed. And everyone was like, this is super sketchy, like he totally knew about it, that's why he didn't turn this like minute and a half in. Oh my gosh. And so they were going to impeach him for lying to Congress, but he went ahead and resigned before Congress could start the process. He would have been the only president who was officially impeached and removed from office as a result of impeachment. But like I said, he went ahead and resigned because he knew that they were going to impeach him anyway. So he just resigned. The only president to have resigned from the presidency. And it was just super crazy. He had just his time as president was crazy. He was, his first vice president was, I think it was Spiro Agnew. I think if I remember correctly, that was the name. Anyway, he had to resign because of some scandal, and he appointed a guy named Gerald Ford. And then when Nixon had to resign because of the scandal, Gerald Ford became president since he was vice president, and nobody had ever voted for him. So that's kind of crazy. Only president in United States history that became president and didn't receive not a single public vote. Whoops. Anyway, towards the end of the war, we get a new president. His name is Ronald Reagan. And well, I think I have a slide on Reaganomics, don't I? Yeah. Okay. He makes a very famous speech asking the leader of the Soviet Union at the time, Mikhail Gorbachev. He's outside of the Berlin Wall. He says, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Right? By the way, we're talking the 80s here. Okay? This Berlin Wall is still up in the 1980s. This is crazy. And so he's encouraging the Soviet Union basically to, not be so restrictive anymore and tear down the wall. Again, by the way, this Berlin Wall is still up in the 80s, which means that Berlin and Germany were still split in the 80s. Okay? Germany wasn't put back together until after the Berlin Wall falls down in 1989. Okay? That's when we put Germany back together. Up until that point, we had East Germany and a West Germany. So the Germany that you know today, not I don't know how much you guys know about Germany, but the Germany you know today was really only founded as a unified Germany 6 years before I was born. Crazy. Blows my mind. Anyway, back to Reagan. Something else we need to know about Reagan is called Reaganomics. If you haven't figured it out, it's a merge of Reagan's name and the word economics. And Reaganomics is used to describe basically Reagan's economic policies, shocker, hence the name, during the time. He starts a wave of what we call conservative power, or sometimes Republican power. And political historians say that this really probably didn't end until Barack Obama was elected. Even we had Clinton in the middle there. He was a Democrat, but he was much more of a conservative Democrat. So, like I said, political historians say that this Reaganomics, this wave of conservative power, really didn't end until Obama was elected. But anyway, what is Reaganomics? What is conservative power? Cutting taxes, so people paying less taxes, especially larger businesses. Cutting payments to government programs, so less government spending on programs like Medicare, Medicaid, welfare programs, food stamps programs, those kinds of things, as well as other government spending cuts. And they also appoint really restrained justices who are not known for making a lot of change. Does that make sense? Another kind of big part of typical conservative power is, or Reaganomics as well, is increased military spending. I cannot remember if I've talked about this before, but we did not used to have a standing military, which means that during times where we were not at war with anybody, the military was actually really quite small. We did not spend a lot of money. There were not a lot of members of the military, so we weren't having a lot of money spent on paying them salaries and things. It was a much smaller institution during times of peace. When we needed to go to war or we were preparing to go to war, that's when the military spending kicked up, and then once the war was over, the military spending went back down. Pretty much since World War II, military spending, I don't think, has gone down a single year. Military spending has increased and increased and increased. Obviously, a lot of people say, okay, well, we're at war right now, but, I think as a result of the Cold War, feeling constantly at edge of this, giant atomic war that might possibly break out between the Soviet Union, we felt like we were constantly at war, even though we weren't. And so our military spending has never gone down. I don't fact check me on that. I can't confirm that because it may have been in recent years military spending gone down, but it certainly has never gone back down to pre-World War II military spending. But anyway, that's a lot more than we need to know. I'm kind of going off on tangents here. After Reagan, he serves his 2 terms and then he's done. Fun fact, I'm going off on tangents again. Ronald Reagan was an actor, which is kind of cool. And he also had dementia, Alzheimer's. I can't remember. He had some sort of mental disease later in his life. I can't remember if I know any more fun facts about Reagan. But anyway, okay, moving on. So he serves his 2 terms. His vice president goes on to get elected, George H.W. Bush, the older Bush. He died relatively recently, within the last 2 years, I think. Right? Oh my God, is he alive? No, he's totally dead. Let me find out. Yep, I was right. He died in 2018. He is the father of the other Bush. He is also a Republican. He serves from only 1 term. He serves from 1989 to 1993. He technically was president during the fall of the Soviet Union and the bringing down of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, even though he was, again, only president, right, for a couple of months in 1989. So, you know, probably more a result of presidents before him, but since he was president at the time of it, he gets the credit. We've seen that a number of times throughout United States history. We finally assemble East and West Germany. Assemble East and West Germany back together, and it becomes, I guess, basically the Germany that we know today, which, like I said, is absolutely crazy that that was not even 30 years ago. Wow. Yikes. Anyway, there's Bush. He was also president during a quick little war that we had called the Persian Gulf War. It's also sometimes known as Operation Desert Storm. This war was like literally like not even 6 months or something like that. It was a really short war. So here's the background. Iraq invaded a tiny country nearby called Kuwait, trying to control their oil supply, their oil sources. And the United States, along with some other countries who were very dependent on these countries for oil and needed everything to be stable, we swoop in and help Kuwait defend themselves against Iraq invasion and push Iraq out of Kuwait. And do I have a thing about this? No. We had insane military weapon superiority over the Iraqi military. Like, absolutely, totally, I can't even find words for it, at how much more advanced our weapons were. And we totally wiped out the Iraqi war. Like I said, this was like a matter of months. And it was a little bit of kind of a bad thing because well, I guess it's kind of pretty much is a bad thing. As the Iraqi army was fleeing, the United States Army attacked them again. So it was kind of like, well, they were leaving, so you should have just let them be, right? And then some people say, well, technically we were still at war, so, anything's fair game at that point, attacking the enemy. So it's a little bit of, but anyway, that's something that he is known for, George H.W. Bush. Next comes Bill Clinton. He was a Democrat, but he was a much more conservative Democrat. He served 2 terms from 1993 to 2001. Under Bill Clinton's presidency, we fully restore our relationship with Vietnam. So remember, we didn't have a good relationship with Vietnam because the whole, Vietnam War thing, butting our nose into stuff, and totally leaving South Vietnam to basically be crushed by the communist Viet Cong in North Vietnam. Yikes. But Bill Clinton says, this is dumb. You know what? They haven't, really been bad to us. They're just like kind of communist or whatever. So, Vietnam is a little odd. In my personal opinion, I don't think anybody has implemented communism the way the inventor of communism, Karl Marx, has intended. That's an ideological debate for another time. But anyway, Vietnam is like less communism, like more like socialism kind of thing. It's weird. But anyway, Bill Clinton says, you know what, we should be friends again. And we do. We become friends with them and trade partners with them again. Bill Clinton also creates something called NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. You may have heard of this. I believe, if I remember correctly, Donald Trump has canceled NAFTA now. But NAFTA was basically an agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada that we would not put tariffs. Remember our vocab word from a little while ago, tariffs, taxes on imports from other countries. So we would not put taxes on any goods from the United States, Mexico, or Canada that were being sold amongst them. Does that make sense? So we could send things that we made to Canada and Mexico to be sold with absolutely no tariffs. Mexico could send things to the United States and Canada to be sold with no tariffs, and then Canada could bring things to sell in the United States and Mexico with no tariffs. That's been dismantled now. Like I said, President Trump undid that, and I can't remember if they were approved or not, but was in negotiations to create separate trade agreements with Mexico and Canada. So I have to do some research on where that is right now, but that was a big thing that kind of characterized Bill Clinton's presidency. He also reworked some welfare programs and cut government spending, so that's where, like I said, he's more of a conservative Democrat. Um, he also lowered the government's deficit, which is how much money the government owes to other countries' governments, and was, I guess, a pretty popular president. He did cause a scandal in office, though. He cheated on his wife and then kind of lied about it to Congress on a separate issue. And then the woman in question produced evidence, some clothing, and anyway, and basically found out that he had lied to everybody about it. And he got impeached, but he was not removed from office as a result of his impeachment. So there's that. One of my favorite things about Bill Clinton, though, is he's inexplicably, well, let's just watch it. Let's just play it. This is while he's running for president. What? Can you just imagine as a presidential candidate, right? He's running for president and just going on like a late night talk show like Jimmy Fallon or whatever and just putting on some sunglasses and just playing the saxophone. Oh my goodness, this gives me a good chuckle every single time I watch it. But anyway, that's still. Oh my goodness, I love history. Anyway, that's Bill Clinton, and he serves until 2001. That's when the younger Bush gets elected. He also serves two terms, 2001 through 2009. Many of you were probably born during Bush presidency. He is a Republican, and he was president at the time of the September 11th attacks in 2001. He'd only been president for a couple months. September 11th, we had terrorists fly planes into the World Trade Center, which is also known as the Twin Towers. Also, a third plane was flown into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and a fourth plane was headed for either the White House or the Capitol building. A little bit of debate about that one, but that one was brought down in a field in Pennsylvania by the passengers on board. And it was a huge deal. I mean, I don't think I have to tell you guys that, but it had a really, really big impact on the United States. Not only, obviously physically with the destruction and such, but mentally as well. It was a major turning point in United States history in terms of relationships with other countries, in terms with internal issues. It was very influential. As a result of those terrorist attacks, we got ourselves involved in wars with Afghanistan and Iraq, which went on for much of his presidency, honestly. You might even make a little bit of a case that we're kind of still there. We are still there, but you might even make a case that it's still connected to these two early wars. And then, like I said, he's the son of the older Bush. His brother, Jeb, ran for president 2016? I think it was 2016. I think it was. Yeah. I think he was one of the other candidates against Donald Trump. I can't even remember. Wow, it feels like so long ago. After Bush comes Barack Obama. He was a Democrat. He served from 2009 to 2016, 2 terms. He is the first black president of the United States. There he is. You probably remember a lot of his presidency. This was when you guys were pretty decently grown. Some things that Barack Obama's presidency I remembered for, first is probably the largest one, is the Affordable Care Act, which was also nicknamed Obamacare. For some reason, people think that those are two different things. They are not. The name of the law is the Affordable Care Act, and then mostly Republicans nicknamed it Obamacare. Um, like I said, some people, I've seen videos of people, of course, this is one in a million, but who, are talking down on Obamacare, but then also saying their insurance is through the Affordable Care Act, so they look a little goofy there because they don't know what they're talking about. But basically, what the Affordable Care Act is, it is a government health care option. So people always talk about government health care switching over to government health care, government run health care. The Affordable Care Act it provides a government healthcare option, but it doesn't really touch the private healthcare businesses. Does that make sense? So you could continue to have healthcare through your private, whatever your job. Most jobs provide you healthcare. Like I have healthcare through Winchester Public Schools, so I pay them and they manage my healthcare. That can be very expensive though sometimes. Healthcare is definitely not cheap. So it provided a little bit of a cheaper government option. A lot of this law has been pulled apart. Bits and pieces of it, I think, are left, but a lot of it has been deemed unconstitutional. So not a ton of it remains, from what I understand. But that was a defining part of his presidency. He was also credited with capturing a terrorist leader named Osama bin Laden. He was the leader of a terror group called Al Qaeda. This is what I'm saying down here at the bottom, Al Qaeda. So that was a very big deal. I remember that. I remember that happening in the news and everybody making a big deal of it. I don't know. You guys probably remember it. I don't think it was. It was 2011, 2012. 13? I don't know. But anyway, that was, again, something very monumental during his presidency. We're going to talk more about these last two slides in our next note video, our Modern American Issues. But I throw them in here since we're kind of talking about this thread. Over the years, obviously, you guys probably know more about this, hearing the news and that kind of stuff. But we've seen an increase in immigration. We've mentioned this a number of times over United States history. This time, the largest regions from which American immigrants are coming from are Central America and South America. And just like every single time we have large waves of immigration, large increases in immigration, we've had discussions about border policy, which is how strict or how easy should immigration be, what should the physical borders look like, but also what should the process to citizenship look like, who can apply, what's the application process like, who can't apply, all that kind of stuff. And discussion about all of that has, like I said, popped up every single time we've talked about large waves of immigration over United States history. We also have an increase of technology now. I don't think I have to tell you guys that. Here we are right now using technology to go to school. Many jobs use technology now, and many jobs are reliant on technology. The job is technology. There are, probably wouldn't surprise me if there were, dozens, if not in the hundreds of college majors now available to you guys that weren't available to, your parents or your grandparents' generations, because of how quickly technology is changing. We also see some rises in ways that jobs use technology. Telecommuting has become especially important. It was important before, but now it's extra important. Here we are, all stuck at home. Telecommuting is the process from working from home and using technology to interact with your coworkers that way instead of face-to-face. So, it could be just on the telephone, right? Calling people, having conference calls. Today, people use Google Hangouts. We use Zoom to have FaceTime meetings, that kind of stuff. But definitely, as I think you knew it before, but we certainly know it now, that internet and computer usage have completely changed the way people are interacting. and moving forward in their lives. And that's it. Like I said, we're going to touch more on modern American issues in our next little baby set of notes. But that's it. This is pretty much modern America here. Here we are. All right, everyone. Goodbye. Stay healthy and safe.